Welcome to Kids Matter. I'm Dr. Elisa Minkin. As a pediatrician, mom, and grandma, I understand how challenging it can be to help our kids grow into their best selves. We are so much more powerful together. Here, I will be sharing the knowledge and wisdom of a wide range of people who understand and care deeply about children. I'm hoping for your input as well, because kids really do matter. They are our future. Welcome back to the Kids Matter podcast. I'm really honored and really excited to be here today with Dr. Nimali Fernando, otherwise known as Dr. Yum. Dr. Fernando is a board-certified pediatrician and the founder of the nonprofit, the Dr. Yum Project. She is also co-author of the award-winning book, Raising a Healthy, Happy Eater. She is the co-creator of the Dr. Yum Adventure, a research-backed nutrition curriculum that teaches young children to enjoy fruits and vegetables, and of Touchpoints, a family-centered intensive health, behavior, and lifestyle program for children. Her food as medicine approach has been featured nationally in the New York Times, NBC Nightly News, and Voice of America. These are incredible accomplishments, and I am so honored and so excited to be doing this with you. There is so much negative talk right now, right? About how impossible it is to feed kids and ultra-processed foods and obesity and food deserts and all that kind of stuff. And I love that you are doing preventative and proactive things out there. And so I'm really excited to talk to you about this. I'm also going to say, first of all, here's your book for people who are watching the video, Raising a Healthy, Happy Eater. It's amazing. I highly recommend it. Your website, the Dr. Yum Project, is gold. It is money in the bank. Everybody should be on that, whether it's a parent, whether it's a teacher, whether it's any kind of clinician. I'm also going to say that your co-author of this book, Melanie Potok, is a feeding and speech therapist who is amazing, and I'm separately planning on interviewing her at least twice. So we're not going to do the same topics as I'm doing with her, which is really more about the basics of feeding and then feeding issues that come up. We're going to talk about other things. I'm really excited about that. So I want to go right into it. And I want to start with, first of all, how did you get into this?
Thank you for all of that. And I'm excited that you're interviewing Melanie too. She has taught me so much over the years and is such a good friend to me. Yeah, this really started out of a desire to help parents. I actually grew up around food. We were very connected to food. My parents were immigrants. They came from Sri Lanka. And my father came to do his medical training, and my mom decided to stay home and raise the family full time. And so she was really careful in making sure we stayed connected to our culture through the robust foods that are part of the Sri Lankan cuisine. So highly spiced curries and deviled fish and vegetables. And she was always cooking those things, but she was really curious to learn how to perfect the perfect Thanksgiving dinner, that turkey with all the trimmings. And so she was always learning about food. And I was often her sous chef helping her. And so I really learned how to cook from a young age. And I learned how important meal times were too, because she always made space for meal times and for that connection that happens. You know, as pediatricians, we know it's not just about the food, it's about a connection at mealtime. And so when I went into pediatrics, I felt really lucky that I grew up with all of those great advantages, but I was seeing so many families with children who were struggling with food. And often there was this sort of family kitchen in crisis. And a lot of the problems that I was seeing were obesity and constipation, and really things that were very connected to diet. And at the same time, I was starting to raise my own family with two young, busy boys and a husband that also had a career in medicine. And I really started to see it's really hard to raise curious, confident eaters. It really is. There's time pressures. There's different styles of learning. I had two children who are very different in the way that they learned. And I found myself getting tempted by all of this very highly marketed, very easy, kid-friendly convenience foods that would sort of check the box at the end of the day. Like, okay, we got dinner done. And so I was starting to feel like if I am struggling with this task of raising confident eaters, then how is anyone else supposed to do this? And there were a lot of families I saw that had a lot more barriers than me, kids who were neurodivergent and kids who didn't have access to foods, kids who had differences in their the way that they learned to eat. And so I was looking for resources for those patients and for myself, really. How do I do this better? So I was looking for things that were practical and uplifting and that weren't really judgmental, right? And it was hard for me to find them. So I just started sharing recipes. It was very simple. And I put them on a website, and I would tell patients at the end of their visit, okay, here's my website, and here's what's working in my family. Why don't you give some of these recipes a try? And families really, I was surprised. They went to the website and they tried the recipes and they shared their successes. And we could really share each other's successes too. And it was really fun for me to see these small wins. And so I decided to make the leap and start a practice of my own where I could really have more robust conversations about nutrition. And I put a teaching kitchen in the middle of this practice.
So cool.
And a garden. So I could really create this human lab where we could, through a nonprofit team, which was the Dr. Yum Project, which we eventually created, we could figure out what those barriers were and let families test our solutions in real time in our teaching kitchen, whether that be recipes or curriculum, classes, whatever it may be. And so for 10 years, we perfected what worked. And that really became the ecosystem of the Dr. Yum Project with all of its free recipes and resources for families and programs that we've created.
I love it so much, and I love that you shared it for everybody else. Everybody listening, go right now, stop the podcast, check out all of the features. And for people listening to you speak now, you are available to speak elsewhere to talk more about your programs because this is what you do now, right?
This is what I do, yeah. At some point, about 2 years ago, I was seeing the great need for programming like this. And for instance, our adventure, Dr. Yum's adventure program is now in 44 states. And I've been able to really put more time into getting that program out because I put the pause on my practice to really focus on the nonprofit work. And that's been a great joy for me because I've been able to see the impact and the ways that we are helping teachers and parents to treat nutrition with a more uplifting tone.
I love this so much, and I love how you talk about eating as a skill that needs to be learned as a developmental task, similar to, say, reading. We don't expect kids to learn to read without help.
Yeah.
Why do we expect them to learn to eat?
It's absolutely true. So in that 10 years where we were learning, I decided I needed to bring other professionals that understand feeding and nutrition and child development, including teachers, and create something that was really more robust and informed by all of these different disciplines. And one of the people that I called was Melanie Potok, who is a specialist in feeding. And she sees kids with all different types of feeding challenges. And what I learned through my friendship with her is that feeding is a developmental process. And I also learned in that 10 years that parents really want to do what's right for their children, but it is a struggle because of the heavily marketed food, because of time constraints, access to food, but also because children learn to eat differently, right? Just like children learn to read differently on a different time scale. When a child struggles with reading, though, we don't blame the parents, right? We don't blame the child or stigmatize the child and call them a bad reader. We can employ an uplifting, evidence-based framework to teach that child to read and eventually get them across the finish line. And so I was seeing that we really could apply that same framework to feeding. If we can train teachers and parents to think about feeding as a developmental process, to walk them through that development whether it's slowly or quickly, right? Knowing that it's going to be different for every child and not apply labels to them along the way, call them fussy eaters or picky eaters to their face, right? And give them the framework that they need and early intervention when necessary if they're struggling. Then we could have a huge public health impact.
Really could. And I'm glad you mentioned early intervention, but I want to talk about that just for a minute because I'm seeing a lot of kids with feeding issues, and feeding therapy is a thing. However, it can be very hard for families to access this. Early intervention, to qualify for early intervention, at least in New York where I am, you need to have a 33% delay in one area or 25% in two or more. And I don't believe feeding alone would qualify you.
Yeah.
So if you have, say, a speech delay and a feeding problem and you meet criteria,
Sure.
it is definitely something to consider getting evaluated for. But what if you have a feeding issue and you don't qualify for feeding therapy? Then what?
Yeah, I think the first stop is to your pediatrician to learn about the steps that you might be able to take and to really ask for that follow-up from your pediatrician too. Make sure that the growth is still on track because there may be other things going on along with feeding that might buy you that referral to a specialist that could give you the help that you need. But really, our focus is preventing those feeding disorders by starting so early that we can right those little behaviors from the beginning and give parents a toolbox and also give them the confidence to know that children really are curious, but sometimes they just need a little bit more time and patience and more variety. And that's why we do it in schools too, to be able to, for parents who may not have access to novel, nutritious foods at all times, we can provide that experience with teachers leading that charge in the schools.
I love that. And I love having the schools be a place where kids can learn this because pediatricians are really busy. And I'm going to say, yes, speak to your pediatrician, but not all pediatricians are as knowledgeable about the developmental aspect of feeding. And they may say to you, okay, your child is growing and gaining fine. There is no problem.
Sure.
Where your child actually does have feeding issues that need to be addressed. So I'm going to say to the parents, listen to your gut.
Yes.
Right? Ask for a separate visit and ask if the pediatrician which pediatrician in the practice, if there's multiple ones, is best at feeding issues. You always want that for anything because we're not jack of all trades. We're humans.
It's hard
right?
to
And
be.
there are areas that we know more about, that we're more interested about. So for me, I get those patients because I have an adult daughter on the spectrum who didn't eat food for 4 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was a very severe feeding disorder. So I'm super passionate about feeding issues, but also about preventing them, which is why I'm so excited to be doing this with you today. So I want to move on to what you call the parenting passport, and I'm going to help you through it.
Okay.
Because I have it in front of me.
Yes.
You have 7 different passport stages or steps or whatever, and I really like them because it breaks it down into components. The first one is celebrate each step.
Yes. So we created these passports. We think of all of this journey of feeding as an adventure, right? So we thought it would be fun to create these passport stamps. And so the first one is take each step. And that is really trying to let parents know that this process of teaching your child to eat can be really a longer process than you might realize. And so offering broccoli 3 times your child not showing that they love it yet, it's just the beginning, right? For some kids who are very sensitive, just putting it on their plate and making friends with it. That's what we call it in the Dr. Yum adventure. Let's just make friends with it. Let's look at how beautiful it is. Let's put it on our plate and maybe smell it or touch it and talk about how bumpy and strange it feels. Those are wins. For so many children who are very hesitant, those little baby steps are wins. And so we have to be able to celebrate the wins and know that the biggest win, which for a parent might be that they take a bite and they enjoy it, that will come in the future. We have to take these little steps first.
Really love that. So the second one I have related is understanding developmental stage.
Yeah, as we said, feeding is a developmental process, and there are all of these sort of sub-developmental skills that make up the umbrella of feeding, that are under the umbrella of feeding: oral motor skills, fine motor skills, gross motor skills, cognitive skills, taste training. And we can be working on all of those skills. For instance, when a child is getting their tummy time as an infant, before they even take a bite of food, they're working on core muscle strength. And that core muscle strength is so important for them to be able to sit in a feeding chair and feel comfortable and be able to focus on eating and enjoy it. So understanding that there are steps that we have to take, and we can nurture that development and be proactive in service of feeding, and understand that there are little red flags along the way that we can be watching for, so we can have those conversations early with our pediatrician and avoid those bigger feeding issues down the line. It's super important.
Really is. And I'm thinking of my two youngest grandkids who were 9 months and a year. And thank God they're both turning into great eaters. But the difference between them in the beginning, they're two different kids.
Yeah.
So one of them at 9 months, no, maybe he was like 5 months old. I remember I gave him Bamba and he pounded them, to quote my daughter.
Yeah, yeah.
He's just a natural eater. And my granddaughter needed to scientifically toss almost all of it, maybe all of it, all her high chair for months. And you had to be a little more patient with her, but they're both great eaters.
Yes.
And both my daughters are rocking it. You guys are awesome, by the way.
I love that.
Shout out to my daughters for raising healthy adventurous eaters.
Kids have their own personalities, and they approach feeding differently too.
Personalities, but also developmental.
And development.
Right?
Their development may be different, yes.
We can't expect this to just happen naturally to all kids at whatever age we think is the normal age. It doesn't work like that. It's developmental. So avoid fear and anxiety is clearly, they're all related, okay?
Right.
Because what happens when your kid is not at the developmental stage another kid at? Anxious.
You get anxious, yes. And I think one of the things that we've lost culturally is this confidence that children will learn to eat these foods. And I think there's a number of reasons that has happened. I just am reading this incredible book by Helen Veit called Picky.
Read it.
Yes, and I think that is a major theme. Back in the 1800s, parents just knew that kids would eat all these foods. They didn't question that. And I think for a number of reasons throughout our culture, we've lost that confidence, and we question and we worry more. And to parents out there, I would say, just take a deep breath and know that over time, most kids will learn to eat these foods if we give them the time, the space, and we continue to bring joy to the dinner table.
Something to that. It's a very interesting book, by the way, Picky,
Yes.
by Helen Veit,
Yes.
V-I-T, I
Yes.
believe. I should probably link it in the show notes, but it's more for historical purposes. She's not a feeding therapist or a
Correct.
physician, just saying, and she does have all these ideas at the end that I'm not sure I 100% agreed with. In terms of anxiety, what we're seeing now is we're seeing a lot of parents who have trouble tolerating the distress of their child.
Yes.
So if this child has more sensory issues, may not even be overtly neurodivergent, or maybe their tone is low, or whatever reason, and they're a little slower, and then it's hard for them, and then the parent becomes anxious,
Yes.
it becomes a vicious cycle of the
It does.
parent not wanting to have the child tolerate distress.
Right.
So again, have a low threshold to get help. I'm going to say, even if you don't qualify for early intervention, there's private therapy. And even if you can't afford a full price speech therapist or feeding therapist, you may be able to access one at a reduced cost from, say, a learning institution.
Yes.
So
as,
just,
as Melanie taught me, if a family feels stressed, right, and they're not getting the answers and they maintain that stress, that vicious cycle can start to bleed into family dynamics too, right? So it is worth asking for that referral if there is stress.
And also from the pediatrician standpoint, okay, or clinician or whatever who's seeing this child, please do not put fire, add oil to the flames or whatever. Do not make this worse by how you approach it, right? If the child isn't gaining weight adequately, be very careful to tell the parent this is not your fault.
Sure.
And not to add pressure for feeding, even if they're gaining properly, but they're having feeding problems. Just be careful.
Yes.
Because what you say can really make a parent who is already going to be prone to anxiety about this even feeling worse.
It's true. I hear a lot of parents saying, my pediatrician said I'll grow out of it. And for a lot of kids that may be true, but I think if a parent is coming to us, we need to pay attention. And so I may do something as simple as ask them to give me a feeding journal. Let's see what it looks like, really. And in reviewing the journal, we may find out there is actually a lot of variety here. And this seems really age appropriate, and keep doing what you're doing. Or we may find out, wow, this is maybe a little more severe than originally advertised, and maybe we do need to pay attention and get some help involved. So I think offering that help and follow-up is really important, and it really makes a difference to parents that they are feeling heard.
Right. And feeling heard is really important, and trusting your own gut instinct as a parent, and the pediatrician or other clinician trusting the parent's gut instinct is important.
Sure.
Even if you don't have time to get the diary, or they don't come back with it or whatever, if a parent is worried, it's something that needs to be addressed.
Sure. Exactly.
Right? I'd rather make a referral that didn't need to happen than
Ignore.
not make it at all and
Right.
ignore it. Dismissing the concern is the flip side of, unfortunately, enhancing anxiety by saying your child's not gaining or growing properly.
Right, right.
And I just want to put one thing out there for Pediasure and related things. That is a Band-Aid, okay?
Exactly.
That is not the solution to restricted eating. So, not that there's no role in it for kids who are gaining weight.
There can be a role in it, but I do feel it is overused in cases. Absolutely.
Yes. So, another one that I love is waiting.
Waiting. I think that really ties in with patience, right? And not pushing. And I think sometimes we over celebrate when we see kids making little progress and having moments where they're finally taking the bite. We are a little overzealous in our praise. And this is a side note to the waiting, but I think we should play it cool and give space and time for feeding to happen, and when it's happening to not overpraise, because sometimes that can be stressful for a child. Like, oh, now I have to do this every time. We have to celebrate every win and really wait and be patient through the feeding process.
And I think it's a nuanced thing, because say you have an older child and that child has tried new food and you really want to celebrate them being brave and trying the new food.
Of course.
Right? But when a child is just doing what they're developmentally meant to do and you're making a big deal about it,
Yeah.
I see that as an issue. And also the negative pressure to eat very often backfires.
Yes, it's true.
So understanding the next milestones, which is anticipatory guidance, as a pediatrician, this is what we're supposed to be doing.
Yes. I always, for my patients who often have a copy of my book, I tell them, read the chapter ahead of where you are. So you know what's coming and you can be ready. You can anticipate. When I see 12-month-old babies, I often will tell the parents, your child's appetite is about to tank. So enjoy these last moments where your child is very hungry, because right now they're growing very fast, but as they become a toddler, their growth really slows down. And you will notice a drop in appetite. And also they're learning how to navigate the world. They're learning to say no. They're learning to get around and use their voice. And so food becomes much less exciting and important, and their body doesn't crave it because their growth is slowing. And you're lucky to get a good meal or two into a toddler. And it's interesting when you tell parents that ahead of time, once they get there, they're not as worried, because they're like, oh, she told me this is going to happen. I just need to put the food in front of them. And if they're hungry, they're going to eat it. And if not, we go to the next meal. If I hear that they ate a great meal in daycare, but they're not eating that great at home when we get home, I'm not worried, because they got that one or two good meals away from the home. That really helps parents navigate that stage so much more effectively. They're not worried. They're not pulling out the highly processed food just to see their child eat and steering their preferences towards the salty, sweet foods. So I love to have that proactive approach when I'm guiding families through feeding.
It's really a lot of bang for your buck. I know that pediatricians are pressed for time. I get that, but just that one line, just planting that in the head before the problems happen. I
Yes.
like at the 9-month visit to be proactive about the switch to cow's milk because one problem I see very commonly is where they are drinking a lot of formula or a lot of breast milk.
Yep.
They switch to cow's milk and they're filling up on that and they're not hungry.
Yes.
And so I like to tell them by the time your child is 1, I'd like them to be having 3 meals, 2 snacks, and not more than 24 ounces of milk.
Yes. Yes.
And so they know what to expect by 1, and
Yes.
hopefully will prevent that overdoing of the milk and underdoing of the food.
Yes. Yes. That's absolutely true. I can't say enough about that proactive approach. So much so that the Dr. Young Project partnered with the Partnership for Healthier America around the Veggies Early and Often campaign. So it's a whole campaign that was centered around this research that showed that early and frequent vegetable introduction is super important for kids to learn to eat their vegetables, and single ingredient vegetables. So not vegetables mixed up with fruits, really getting kids to experience the taste of vegetables in all their bitterness and complexity. So as part of that campaign, we wrote a whole feeding series for parents that can be distributed through pediatricians' offices, through Head Start, through WIC offices. And it's a stage-by-stage guide of feeding. And it really takes it in a proactive way and answers all of those frequently asked questions. We had a whole multidisciplinary team that came together to create that series. And all of us sort of knew from our careers, what are those frequently asked questions? And we made sure to answer them in that series. That is free and available on the website of Partnership for Healthier America and the Dr. Young Project.
I love that so much, but also the whole family has to be on board.
Yes, yes. So we made it so that it's a handout. When you get it from your pediatrician, you can take it home and share it with other caregivers, with maybe grandma who is using her feeding knowledge from years ago, which may be outdated at this point based on the evidence we have. Things like early allergen introduction is not something that we did. It's not something that I did. Introducing peanuts at 6 months was a big no-no, but now we know through scientific studies that it can be really important in hopefully preventing food allergies. So we made it into a handout so it can be shared with all the caregivers, so everyone can be on the same page. And so parents can feel comfortable saying, that's maybe not what I heard from my pediatrician. Here it is in writing. And everyone can rally around the same strategy.
I love that, and I want to underscore that you mentioned vegetables not mixed with fruits, because the pouches that are out there now, are sneaking the vegetables in with lots of fruit sugar.
Yeah, it's true. So
I'm anti-pouch. I don't want to be judgy, but I'm judging.
No, I'm right there with you. I feel like there's a time and a place for pouches.
Right.
And I call it disaster food. Like, it's nice to have in the diaper bag for when you're out if you need it. But there are two things about it. A lot of the pouches do rely on blends. And so they're not introducing those vegetable flavors in their pure form. And there are a lot of fruit with some of the vegetables in there. And so we're not really teaching kids, we're not giving kids that taste training, that 10 or 15 tries that kids need with those challenging vegetables that develop the liking. And also, I think kids are staying on those pouches too long, right? We really want to advance texture quickly. We want kids to learn to use their muscles of mastication and learn to swallow complex textures. And a lot of kids, unfortunately, I see relying on those pouches way too long and not developing those skills, and they're slurping their food instead of learning to chew and swallow it.
Just that, but if you look at the pureed vegetables, especially the green ones, I'm sorry, but I just think they're disgusting, and I think a lot of babies agree with me.
And it doesn't teach kids to eat those vegetables in the way they're going to be presented with them at the family table. Eating carrots or green beans out of a pouch or a jar, it's not the same flavor as eating your grandma's seasoned roast carrot recipe, right? We have a big mantra, which is one meal, one family at the Dr. Young Project. If you go to our website and click on our recipes, you'll see foods that are labeled baby food options. And if you click on that, you'll see all these incredible diverse recipes that don't look like baby food, right? They're family recipes, but we've provided a little shortcut to help babies eat those foods safely. So essentially the babies are eating the same food with the same spices, the same flavors, but maybe we're making it safe by smushing it up in a way that's safer for new eaters. But babies crave flavor. There is an incredible flavor window till about 12 months where kids are hungry and they are loving that flavor that we can provide. And a lot of those spices and things have their own health properties and benefits, but we're training the palate early. And in a lot of cases, it makes life easy, right? If you can just smush up the food that you're eating and not make anything separate or buying anything separate, there's always room for commercially bought baby foods and pouches and things. But to make sharing meals part of the routine really does train the palate from such a young age too.
And it is developmental to learn how to eat. So we're not going to really go into purees versus baby-led weaning here. That's going to be for me to talk about with Melanie.
Yes.
But I love the idea of family meals. And what you could do is feed the baby the purees first if you're doing purees, and then sit the baby down at the table and think about that as exploring food, because parents will worry, how is my child going to get calories in? Nothing is actually getting in. It's all ending up on the floor.
Yes. The good thing is in those first months, we are getting the vast majority of our calories, nutrition, protein, fat through breast milk and formulas. There's not as much pressure to get everything in, but I think parents should feel like this is a great time to explore flavor without the pressure of needing to get so many calories in.
And in the book Picky, it's fascinating how the idea that children are like invalids from back when they were sick so much, and that food should be bland because it should be invalid food. And then you look at the baby purees that have no flavor, like, oh,
that's how we got here.
I see how we got here. So we didn't get to two more passport stamps. One is consistency boundaries, and the other is mindfulness presence. I just want to go through them really quickly because there's so much more.
Yeah. So I think consistency it goes back to like the idea that Alan Satter had of the division of responsibility, right? Parents are responsible for deciding what, when, and where we're going to eat, and children are responsible for deciding if they're going to eat and how much. Kids crave structure. If we can be consistent with how we approach food, this is what's on the menu tonight. If you'd like to try it, you can. Rinse and repeat. That's how children learn. We can't keep moving the goalpost and changing the rules. It's too confusing for children.
And it's not your job to make your child happy all the time. And it's also not your job to get your child to ingest the food. It's their job.
Exactly.
So that's really, really important. And mindfulness presence is what you need to do
that. Yes. And I think taking a beat at meal times and being mindful about the fact that this is not just about calories, right? Kids who have meal times regularly with their families, they're more likely to be able to communicate with the adults around them. They're less likely to engage in risky behaviors. There's so much beyond how many bites of broccoli we're getting. There's that connection. And we should take time to appreciate the food too, right?
And that's why you don't want it to be a time of tension and pressure.
Exactly.
And by the way, kids, especially young ones, are not going to sit at that table for that full meal time, and that's normal.
That is normal. Yeah, we have to be realistic about what kids have the capacity to do.
Exactly. And it's a good idea, by the way, to have a mat under that high chair.
Are you speaking from personal experience?
Oh, yes. To get one just for my granddaughter it comes. Oh, my Lord. Okay, so I just want to take a second to say for neurodivergent kids, it's really the same, only there's more likely to be issues of development, of sensory issues, but they're still going to have the same passport milestones. You just might need to get more help with them, and that's okay.
Yeah, it may be instead of the usual 10 to 15 tries, it may be a few dozen tries. And I think, in my experience, providing that multisensory, regular, consistent exposure to foods, like we do in our food adventure. We play with food. We do science experiments, do art. All of those things we're seeing for neurodivergent kids really do make a difference. They're gaining that sensory confidence without the pressure to try. And so we have a lot of kids whose parents tell us, kids who are autistic that have other feeding challenges, that tell us, wow, this is great because they can do this and feel included and they're making progress. It might be slower, but it's progress. And I think that's really gratifying to see.
Do you have a separate one for neurodivergent kids, a separate food adventure?
We don't. It is the same food adventure. However, we have a lot of feeding therapists who use the adventure in feeding groups for kids with more severe challenges. And that population of feeding therapists who are learning about the adventure and seeing how it could meet a need in their community for kids with feeding challenges is growing.
I love that. I really do love that. And more about that is available on your website. And when we get off the podcast, we're going to talk about how to expand that further. So I also want to talk about your Touchpoints program, just briefly, please.
Yeah, so Touchpoints was a program that I wrote after the American Academy of Pediatrics came out with some new guidelines on the management of obesity in 2023. One of the sort of foundational pieces of advice that we were given, or guidelines that we were given, is around lifestyle treatment. So the idea that when we see children with a high BMI, we should be offering a certain bank of hours of lifestyle treatment, 26 hours of guidance on how we can improve sleep, we can improve diet, we can increase activity, reduce stress and anxiety, all these things that we know are important to maintaining a healthy BMI. And so I saw a lot of stress around this from pediatricians, like how are we going to do 26 hours? Ideally, that would be done in a multidisciplinary clinic where you have lots of people who can work on this with a family. Healthy weight clinics throughout the country do exist, but for many of us, we don't have enough capacity in those clinics to see all of our patients. And so the onus really falls on the pediatrician to do that. So because we've been doing this work for over a decade, I felt like we had the bones of a curriculum that we could give to pediatricians to walk them through lifestyle guidance. And we created a program that could meet those 26 hours through 21 uplifting modules around lifestyle, using some of the Dr. Yum resources like our meal planners and our Meal-O-Matic recipe tool, lots of great tips and shortcuts, addressing things like sleep and activity, food insecurity. So we created this bank of modules that can be customized according to a family's needs. What's great about it is it's not really focused on weight. It is focused on uplifting a whole family with learning healthy lifestyle behaviors, which they can carry with them through life. So one of the ground rules that we try to lay at the beginning is this is not a weight program, this is a health program, a healthy lifestyle program. And it's not just about the child, it's about everybody in the family. So everyone's going to participate in this. And I have personally seen such incredible results, and kids really not just achieving a healthy BMI, but really having fun along the way and feeling empowered and proud of the achievements that they have. Again, it's baby steps, right? So with each module, we assign a little homework assignment. We make sure it's something achievable and something that the child's going to enjoy working on. And we check in with them in the midpoint between visits. And I often find that the children, I don't have to follow up with them. They're sending their homework back and saying, look what I did. So it's been really fun to see how that can impact families. And we have several dozen pediatricians across the country who are using that with great success.
I love it. It is a paid program. It is not that expensive, though, just saying.
No, and it can be used for unlimited amount of patients. And those visits for the pediatrician are billable visits, right? We have a nurse practitioner in South Carolina who has been getting referrals from across the state. And she does Touchpoints almost exclusively now and has had incredible results. She sent me BMI charts and shared stories, heartwarming stories of success. She now has a 6-month wait for points. Yeah.
It is really hard. I'm in New York, and it's in the New York City, Long Island area, and it's really hard to find places to send people, and that's if they want to go and if they can go. Like there's so many barriers to that, it's beyond. So to be able to have something from the pediatrician's office, pediatricians has been one more thing put on their shoulders, and I just want to give a big hug to all the pediatricians out there right now. It's not your fault. It's really hard. It's so much. on us. So to have this program, and yes, you need to make them be separate visits. You can't do this all in your well visit. But while I've said all that, I really want to emphasize how important it is to speak carefully, to tread very carefully when you're talking about weight. I don't know if you want to say anything about that. I could go on forever.
No, again, one of the ground rules is we actually have an opening sheet that we give parents they sign on to do Touchpoints. And in that information, we talk about how this is a lifestyle program. We are not going to talk about weight. I actually really encourage pediatricians to do many of these visits as telehealth visits so that we're not having to weigh them every time and have moments where people might be focusing on the weight and how many pounds did you gain or lose, because this is a journey, right? And we don't want to create an obsession around weight. Kids are so impressionable, and they listen and they hear and internalize so much of the messaging around them. And so I really try to lay that groundwork from the beginning. If the weight comes off, great, but we want to do this in a way that's sustainable and healthy and uplifting for the family. What's been really interesting, though, is I have seen that parents often, because they're modeling and doing this as a family, I've had stories of parents losing weight and feeling healthier and like, how is this happening? I'm not even trying, I'm just modeling for my kids. And so there's been all these fun ripple effects that can happen when we take that really healthy approach that's not just focused on the number on the scale.
I want to put a plug there for not talking about weight in front of children when there's a concern. Speaking to the parents separately. Telehealth can be great for that because it could be when the child's at school. So there's many ways to do this, but please don't, as a clinician, don't do that. It's more counterproductive than productive. And there's two different ways you may see it as a clinician. You may see the BMI rising, that they're gaining more weight than they're growing over time, and that is a concern.
Sure.
Or you might just see a child who's just living in a larger body.
Exactly.
Especially for the taller kids, their BMI may skew higher without it necessarily being a problem.
Exactly.
So I've had conversations right in front of the child saying, I'm not concerned, and this is why I'm not concerned. But if I am concerned, I'm not having that conversation with the child.
And I think
not without speaking to the parent first, you know what I'm saying, and getting a game plan. I'm not afraid of talking about it eventually. But first, I want to talk to the parent.
I think you can't just rely on that growth curve. There's a story the growth curve tells. And then there's the story of the habits that are happening in that family. And that's why before the program starts, we do an intake to see what are we doing great? What are we doing? Where is there room for improvement? That child who's living in a larger body, who's following a growth curve that's consistent, who's actually getting a lot of activity, who's eating a great diet. Like, why are we bothering to have a conversation about that and worrying the family unnecessarily when they may be just doing great, right? So I like to kind of establish what's happening in the family too, so we know how much to be worried and where to apply effort and not worry the family unnecessarily.
It is also the issue of triggering an eating disorder, because it is not 100%. An uncommon story for a child to come out of that visit and say, I'm fat, I have to lose weight.
And we know everything that was bad before the pandemic worsened through the pandemic. Right. And that's one of the things that we saw, that all of those pressures around the pandemic also led to this epidemic of eating disorders. And so we certainly don't want to add to that burden.
Absolutely. And again, since the pandemic, I'm seeing more picky eating. I don't know how much of that is due to the rise in neurodivergence, which we're also seeing. Autism and ADHD rates are rising. How much is due to anxiety in the family or in the child? I don't know. But whatever reason it is, I'm seeing more of that. Do you have a separate program for being more proactive about picky eating?
I think our whole approach in schools, the food adventure, is really with that in mind, really showing teachers in schools and parents through the outreach that we do how to watch for those signs where feeding may be going awry, how to right the ship early, how to apply some of Melanie's incredible techniques in real time when you're seeing mealtime issues, when you're seeing a child who's gagging excessively with certain textures. What do you do in that moment? And we're teaching that in the classroom and through outreach to the parents. I think that's the biggest way that we're doing that from a public health standpoint. We're really working heavily through Head Start programs and through YMCA early learning centers where a lot of families get their childcare.
I'm seeing it in kids under 3. So for those kids, I guess it would still be on the pediatrician to maybe use your handouts and focus on the anticipatory guidance and referrals. Also, I will be doing those episodes with Melanie. One will be on regular, one will be on feeding issues. So hopefully between these 3 together, that will help parents and clinicians help be more proactive. So we could talk about this all day, but I really respect your time and I want to end here. But I want to thank you so much for doing this with me. I'm going to link to all the good things you're doing.
I really appreciate this opportunity. It's been such a fun conversation. And yes, everyone tune into Melanie's episodes because she has such a wealth of knowledge.
Thank you so much for doing this with me.
Thank you for having me. It's been such a great time.
I really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Kids Matter. Raising healthy, happy children takes a village, and I'm grateful you're part of ours. If today's conversation resonated with you, please share this episode with another parent, grandparent, teacher, or anyone who cares about kids. Together, we can build the supportive community our children deserve. I'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts, questions, or suggestions for future topics at kidsmatterpodcast@gmail.com with no explanation point. Your voice truly matters. Until next time, keep advocating for the children in your life because kids really do matter. They are our future. I'm Dr. Elisa Minkin, and this has been Kids Matter. Please note that while I am a pediatrician, I am not your child's pediatrician. This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not constitute medical advice. For any medical concerns or decisions, please reach out to your child's healthcare professional.